So for everybody who's on the phone lines, I'm really glad that you're here. I need to let everybody know, no matter how you're listening to this, that this information is the culmination of about 20 some years of experience with products, and specifically for the US market. So if you haven't joined us before, welcome. We have a lot of new people getting on these calls and this show. We are in the process of rebranding it, so you'll see some new logos and things coming out. But what I want to let you know first is that we are going to be doing a blog post about this, so you definitely should be watching our blog. Even if you are on this and you're hearing it, we are going to add some new content to it in the blog post. So we will do our best to make sure everybody knows that. And then the other piece is, when you ask a question in a few minutes, note that it could potentially be considered public disclosure of your invention. So I'll recommend that you keep back this special secret something about your product. But I will remind everybody of that. So let's dive in. You know, there's this buzzword called branding, right? And there's a lot of misunderstanding about what branding is. You go, oh, I want to brand my product. But people casually toss that around. And frankly, there's not a lot of knowledge behind the practicalities of branding a product, for one thing, or what it is really, or what it's going to take. So I thought I would go through the what it really is and the what it does. And so we may actually have one of our clients that we've been doing some work with on their brand come on the call. He might be calling in if he's got cell phone coverage. So with that, what branding is, there's really kind of two sides to it here. It's the way that I like to think about it is it's the DNA of the look, purpose, and feeling that creates connection with your market, okay? So the DNA of the look, the purpose, and feeling of your product so that it creates connection with your market, okay? And that could be markets. We have some projects that we've worked on where it's actually being sold into 3 distinct markets. So its logo needs to communicate to 3 markets. So the first side of branding is that it is the DNA of the look, purpose, and feeling of your product or offering so that it connects with your market, okay? The second section of what it is that it is all the touch points of communication that communicate with your audience. So that can include things like phone lines, your outgoing voicemail messages, your website, an Amazon listing, email, even how the shipment arrives to your purchaser. It can include sales collateral material that's in it, the look and feel of your booth. All is a part of branding, okay? Your logo is definitely part of your branding. A tagline, part of your branding. And there's also something that people don't really consciously think about, and that's this. The ease of doing business with you, the ease of shopping on your website, the ease of understanding your packaging or the value proposition of the product is also part of your branding, okay? So it's really important to keep in mind that there's these 2 parts to your branding efforts, okay? And to give you an idea of the impact of branding, I have a broker and distributor that we send quite a few products to, and he does astronomical amounts of business with some very large retail accounts, and great guy. And we walk trade shows together occasionally, and I'm always asking him, hey, anything new we need to be aware of, any trends you're seeing? And his answer is almost always 100%. If it doesn't look like it should already belong in the account, I can't even stop and look at it at a booth, okay? So that's how important branding is. This is a very high level guy who cannot even stop at your booth if your branding is off. So it's extremely important from that standpoint. Also, retailers and corporate accounts look at the branding and the feeling of the product to make sure that it's a fit with their audience and their market. So again, really important. Now, so let's talk about the next piece of today's show, which is, what does branding actually do? Okay, so there's 5 or 6 key points here. Number one, it sets up appropriate expectations with your market. Okay, so branding is the thing that communicates a promise to your market. Okay, number 2, it creates a feeling. Now, feelings of brands run far and wide. Okay, it could be that you want to feel very trustworthy, or that when people think about your brand, they're very happy or comforted. There could be fun, or you could just be creating that feeling of solidness, right? If you think about the brand of an insurance company like Farmers or Allstate, they want you to feel like they're going to be there, that there's a stability to them, and that you've got back behind you, you know, like you've got somebody behind you, they've got your back. Okay. The third thing that a branding effort will do, if it's done well, is that it supports pricing that gives you a slight edge. You can do a slight premium and maintain it. Okay. There's a reason that Kleenex facial tissues command a slight premium over store brands. Okay. The slight premium can vary based on the kind of product and the price point that it's in, but it's a very important effort of branding. It creates distinction and separation of your product with the competitor's product. That's the next piece. The fifth thing that it does is it makes marketing messages stick in people's memory. Right now, it takes approximately 12 serious impacts for someone to remember a marketing message, right? We get over 3,000 marketing messages a day. So branding efforts let you have some momentum and some repeatability so that you can get through the clutter and noise. So it makes marketing messages stick in people's memory, okay? Especially when it's relevant to them. And then the fifth thing is that it creates a sense of rapport. Because the marketing message sticks, there's a familiarity that gets bred into the relationship with your product. And that's really what branding is to be doing, is to create that feeling of trust, because that trust and that familiarity gives you speed to the transactions and gives the consumer confidence to pick your product over somebody else's. So branded products work extremely well. Even things like store brands, right? Aldi Markets just opened here near us, and Aldi is a well-established company. They've been on the East Coast for a long time. If you want to look it up, it's ALDI. They're a very different kind of grocery store, though, because they carry almost exclusively their store brands. And they do a lot of marketing and a lot of work to make sure that you believe that their store brands are really good. So they have to put a lot of effort into building their brand every time they go into a new market where they might not have been seen before. However, their play is that it's a value proposition, you know, and that it's still going to be really good, and it's still going to be good for your family. So their brand is very different, and their strategy is different. So your brand will reinforce your strategy. So with all of that said, I'm going to see if we've got any phone lines. Let's see. I don't see Jeff or Kim on the lines yet. So I'm going to hold off. Everybody who's on Facebook Live, you'll be able to see a piece of packaging that's in work. So when you go through a rebranding effort, the other thing that it actually does for you is it increases your confidence levels in your own project, and it gets you really excited, and it gives you something to talk about in a fresh way. So we'll be able to debut this new package really soon here. So with that, I'm going to ask for some questions. So if you're on the Facebook Live, you can just type it in below the feed, and it'll show up. So type your questions, anything around branding, sales, marketing of a product. If you're on the phone lines, you're going to press *2 to raise your hand, and I'll open up your individual line. So press *2 if you're on the phone lines, and if you're on the webcast, you could just type in the Q&A box. So branding is one of the things that we get the most questions about. You know, like, what should I do with my package? What kind of package? So this is usually a really good topic for people. Okay, so checking all the phone lines. Phone lines is *2. Online, Q&A. Just type in the Q&A box, which should be on the web page. And Facebook Live, type it in. You guys are really quiet today about branding. For the number of questions we get about packaging and what to do on sell sheets, this is really, really, really quiet. Okay, so let's see. We've got Gayla on the Facebook Live said, we've been frustrated as we have not been able to come up with a true logo after 2 years of business. Can you help? Yes, we actually do logos. So I'm gonna show Gayla the after, but I don't have the before sticker with me. So this is a new product that's just being launched. It's PowerSafe, and this is trademarked. It is patented, so that I can actually mention this. This is prototype packaging before they go to the hardware show. I think it's reversed on the Facebook Live, but yeah, so we did the new logo on this. We did all the packaging layout and all of those pieces. So yes, we can definitely help. When you're thinking about your logo, it's really important to think through all the ways that a logo is going to be used. So for example, most logos, you're going to want to have it in color, black and white, and you're probably going to want it in a couple file formats too. You might want a JPEG, another file format called a PNG, which means that it doesn't have background, so you can put it over different backgrounds. And then you want the Adobe file, which is usually Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Photoshop, depending on the software that was used to create it. That's the source file. So logos are really important, and how you do them sometimes can get you through on a trademark that you weren't able to get another way. So definitely can have conversation with that. It's really common on new products for people to get hung up on logos and not quite know what to do. So definitely able to help with that. Let's see, and let me go over to our webcast Q&A and hit refresh over here. Okay, and the conference line. *2 to raise your hand on the conference line. Let's talk a little bit about impacting branding when you don't have a lot of money. Anybody want to know about that? When you don't have a lot of money, it's really important to think through the elements of who your product is trying to be sold to. And like I said before, it is about communicating the ethos and feeling of your product to your various markets. Now, some of your markets are the end consumer, and some of you have a market called a business that you're trying to sell to, like Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson, etc. So your brand, when you're selling to these large companies, needs to feel very trustable, okay? Because they're taking a risk giving you space, putting your product into their product line. It's really important for the trust factor and for it to feel solid. Now, this logo for PowerSafe, the way the product is designed now, we actually put their logo very strategically right next to where the Makita and the Black & Decker and the Ryobi logos will be on the tool that this product goes on. Because what it's going to do is that placement of the new product's logo adjacent to an established company is going to transfer some of the brand equity of the established company over to the new product. Okay, so it's a really kind of intriguing relationship when there's a strong brand that you can ethically leverage. Okay, we'll say it that way. So I'll come back to this in a minute if anybody wants. I see that we've got a call on the phone line, and it looks like it's Dina. Hey there, Dina.
Hi.
Hi, what's your question today?
How much, kind of two parts. How much effort do you put in branding the product as well as the company, or do you more focus on the company? And then, how do you know when your branding is good? Do you focus, or when you're sort of ready?
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so great questions. The first part of how much do you focus on branding your company versus the product? It depends on how your naming strategy is set up on the company and the product. Usually, there's a lot of products where the product name is the company name. So all the effort goes behind that one name, and it gets velocity that way. There are products like the Rim Company they put out BlackBerry, right? And BlackBerry for a long time was the better known name, and they kept putting all their eggs in that basket of BlackBerry and branding BlackBerry and getting that known, to the point where they eventually had to actually rename their corporation to BlackBerry, because that's what had the equity, right? So when you are starting out and you've got limited funds, or you've got a lot of speed that you want to get, it's usually best to put the money and effort towards branding the product and have good strategic branding on the company. It doesn't have to be great, but you're not really promoting the company. And it also depends on where you're selling. If you're going to sell to the consumer, brand the product first, okay? If you're going to sell to a corporation, you want to brand the product first and feel trustable on your corporate stuff. But it doesn't have to feel exciting. Does that make sense?
Yes, sorry about the screaming.
That's okay. For everybody who's listening, Dina has some children's products, and they were inspired by her kids. So that's just her inspirational muse in the background. So the other question you had was about how do you know when your branding is good and you're ready, right? There's a certain part where, we always want to be as ready as possible, but what is ready, right? And sometimes ready is like the timing is just, this is what has to happen. For you particularly, I think the logos and things are ready. I think the packaging is a big piece on what you're working on. Everybody, I happen to know Dina's project, so she's working with us on some things. And I think that for everybody to get a point here, how do you know when you're ready? Is like saying, how do you know when you're grown up, right? Because of the response that you're getting from other people. If when you first show your brand, people understand your product easily and they get it pretty quickly, then it's on brand. The other thing you can check in on if you're looking for brand consistency across, say, your email or your outgoing phone messages, those kind of things, is does it represent the same consistent feeling? Okay, so by that I mean for our company, for example, our logo has to feel very trustable, but creative, right? And the messaging of the emails and things that we send out is friendly, approachable, and that you can trust the information, and that we're going to make it so you can understand things, right? That we're going to speak in really direct terms. So if I were to come out with an email to y'all that was filled with retail mumbo jumbo and formulas that you had no relationship to, and it was using a lot of lingo, then it would actually be off brand. Does that make sense? So the checkpoint is always, does it feel consistent? And are people responding the way you want them to respond? Okay. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. for yours, the feeling that I get when I look at your branding is that it's fun, that there's kind of a warm, nurturing quality to it, and that it's going to be simpler. Like life will be simpler for using the product. And I think that's what you're trying to communicate. Is that actual truth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Spot on. Thank you.
You're welcome. So keep all of your packaging fairly streamlined. Don't make it hard to get into the product, because that would be off-brand if you had a bunch of like security tags and that kind of crazy. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to mute your line for your privacy. So if you're on the phone line, press star 2, raise your hand, and will let me know to open up your line. I'm going to refresh our webcast. So cool. No webcast answers. Wow, for a group that asks so many branding questions of us, you guys are really quiet publicly. This is really ironic. So I see we've got a question from a phone number ending in 5577. Hi there, what's your question? And who am I talking to?
Oh, hi, Amy. This is Doris Luna, Dorothea Essences.
Hello, Doris. What's your question today?
The branding is overwhelming for me. So what is your advice if you want to take it like one step at a time? What is the first thing you advise to focus on?
That's a great question.
I know you mentioned a lot of things, but if I were to do one thing today or this week,
Yeah.
what is it I should really look at?
I love that you're thinking this way. Thank you. The first thing to focus on is always, what is it that you want people to feel when they look at your product, right? And just answer that question, okay? So the first thing to focus on is the feeling that you want people to have, okay? Because all of your decisions come out of that, right? For you, again, everybody, Doris has been working with us on a couple of things related to pricing and some assortments. Doris, for you, your brand is a little bit about exclusivity because of the limited quantities that the formulations come in, and it's about energy. So yours has to feel upscale, luxurious, yet energetic and kind of spiritual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
a good designer, if you give them kind of those words, will go, oh, okay, I need to pick fonts for this label that communicate that, because fonts have different feelings to them, right? Colors have different feelings to them. And even package formats communicate different feelings. Does that help you?
Yes, that helps me, and like it is the overall look of where you're going, correct?
Yeah, the overall look and the thinking through what is kind of the experience that you want someone to have when they look at your product, right? Because if you can communicate that, then the designer has more to go on, right? And that's really what you're doing. That conversation is part of the design tool and of setting up a good rapport with your designer. Does that make sense?
Correct.
So
It does. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
That's always the first place to start is, well, what is it we want people to feel when they look at this product? Okay?
All right. Thank you.
You're-
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm going to mute your line for your privacy. Let's see, we've got another phone call from a number ending in 1568. Is this Kim?
Oh, it is. Hi.
Hey, Kim. I was just mentioning y'all for a few minutes ago. I'm so excited. Everybody, this is Kim Walters. She and Jeff Walters, her husband, have been behind PowerSafe for a few years now. And we just were working on their packaging and their branding. And so, Kim, welcome. Thank you so much for calling in. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just with me too. So we're both sitting here.
Oh, awesome. Hi. So, we're talking a bit about the impact of branding, and some of what we were talking about earlier was that part of what branding does is that it sets up appropriate expectations with the market, and that it creates a feeling of trust and helps support pricing, and that it creates a sense of rapport. And then I mentioned sometimes as a new product, you can actually leverage the kind of halo that's around existing products. And I mentioned PowerSafe and how we've got the logo of PowerSafe, the new logo, going right next to Ryobi and Black & Decker and Milwaukee and Makita. So I just want to know, what's your experience when you've seen the difference between where your branding was and where it is now? What's it do for you?
Definitely validates it that it's a brand that can compete and at an equal level with Milwaukee and Ryobi and the rest of them. But it's also interesting. I had sent it to a picture of our new branding to an investor who I haven't heard from for 6 months. And as soon as he saw the picture, within 2 minutes, he texted me back and wanted to know what my sales were, and he wanted in when the sales were moving along fairly well. So just the branding kind of woke him up.
That's awesome. And Jeff, you said something the other day. We were talking about, well, first off, for everybody's information, can I share a little bit about the process and the ideas of putting some of the product information on the product, etc.? Can I share a little behind the scenes on that?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. So,
yeah, definitely.
So since we're talking in a wider conversation about branding, Jeff and Kim's product, PowerSafe, it's a vinyl handguard that goes on power tools. And it's got some really cool specific features. Jeff is a general contractor, and this solves a really important problem. So when we first saw the product, first off, it was just the clear vinyl. It doesn't have any warning language on it, and the logo was kind of hard to read. So the new logo is very blocky, it's strong, and it's in the colors consistent with warnings and construction. And so in thinking about the branding, we actually also were looking at the product itself and on any changes and improvements that can be done to the product to make it safer and better, and to also lower your liability, right? So when you're looking at branding, it's all of those pieces, all right? So you got so excited the other day, Jeff. You said you were driving around and you had some of the original version without the additional branding on it. What was that like? You were looking at it. You were kind of laughing.
I was laughing. It was the beginning of the seed, and now it's grown into a nice, big, harvestable, tree. And in the beginning, it was just a little tiny seed, but it's a super great concept idea. But the branding is what's going to make it come alive and get people to take it off the shelves.
Yeah, and you're getting ready for a big show, right?
We are down in Vegas. I'm going to see you there, hopefully, right?
We will be there. So we're going to meet Jeff over at the National Hardware Show at the beginning of May. And the new branding is part of the effort of getting ready. They're going to be walking the show floor, and we're going to make a couple introductions and be looking for a couple things for them. So what I wanted to really talk about with the branding is the level of excitement too, because the other thing that good branding does, to go to Dina's question from earlier, is it gives you confidence and it creates excitement, and there's a platform that you can stand on. So Jeff and Kim, you guys have been awesome. When we show them packaging, they literally light up. it's like we do it on video conference, and you guys just like, you get like kids, and you're just so excited.
So awesome.
So
exciting. So exciting.
So, you know, when we first met, we were talking about how you test good packaging. Remember, we did the closed eye exercise and open your eyes and what do you focus on? When you do that,
Yes.
when you do that with the new branding, what happens? You know?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's that same feeling, except now it's ours. You know what I mean? It's our packaging that we're able to close our eyes. You understand? So it's magnified, hugely magnified. But yes, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, and the new branding also, what, you know, when you look at it from a liability standpoint and all the elements that go into it, you know, it's a lot safer for you
Yeah.
too.
Yes, exactly.
So do you think the new branding kind of communicates what you want the product to be for people?
Oh yeah, it definitely illustrates. You know, pictures and photos are so essential, and it illustrates how to use it, what it's for, and how simple a product it is, and how safe a product it is, and how inexpensive it is to add it to your arsenal of tools and tool safety. So it does all those things, and it protects us as well as the manufacturer with the break seal agreement and all the language that you and your team put together for us. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and you know, so one of the things that we were talking about with branding that people don't think about a lot is the elements of all the methods of delivering on the feeling of a brand. So, you know, we're about safety and about consciousness with the tool. So we actually, you know, including the break seal agreement and a sticker, because this is related to power tools for everybody who's not familiar with it. We actually have a sticker that, you know, has people get conscious to the fact that they still have to pay attention to where they're putting their hands, because we want to make sure that they're safe. And so it goes with the consistency of the product. So thank you so much for calling in and sharing what it's like when you're in that transition from, you know, the first brand that you put out in the world to where you are now. It's really important. People had a lot of questions about that today.
It's freaking awesome is what it is.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Hey, do you guys have any questions about branding and next parts to implement with it? Anything? You don't have to, but
Me?
yeah.
So, actually, we're so close, but yes, getting it to the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
You know how that's going to look and how we're going to do the social media, those kinds of things, or at least you know, that's really the marketing aspect of it next.
Yeah, you know, that's a great point. You know, let's talk a little bit about branding and social media, because that's a really big impact that not a lot of people think about. So social media has to be consistent with your brand, and advertising does too. There have been some recent horrible snafus with branding and, you know, major corporations getting blemished just in the past 2 weeks. So for example, Pepsi, the ad that they just did with one of the Jenners, you know, I think it was Kylie Jenner, where she's got a Pepsi and she's watching the Black Lives Matter movement, and it came across as Pepsi was trying to co-opt this important social movement, and that they were trying to hijack it, and it actually gave them huge backlash because it wasn't consistent with their brand, right? And it created a lot of problems, and they had to pull the ads after spending all that money and time and effort producing them, because there was such a problem on social media because it wasn't consistent with their brand. So for you, you have to be consistent. Like, I would say in your social media, we're probably going to be showing guys using it on a job site, you know, talking a bit about the seriousness of what happens with some of the tragic accidents where people weren't using it. And those have to be done very respectfully and from a place of compassion and kindness. Really, if you're going to talk about something that is shocking to the market, which you may need to do to break through the clutter and noise, because we're talking about people, potentially losing fingers and, loss of income and their ability to support their families, you have to do that with a lot of compassion if you're going to go there on that message. Okay? So that would be consistent with your brand of saying the why it's invented, why it was created is an important part of what you're doing, because they need to know that it was created by a guy who's a general contractor who builds, high-end homes and has been doing it for a long time, very successfully. And he did this because he cares enough to stop problems that don't need to happen, right?
Right, definitely.
Right, so that's on brand. The other thing that would be on brand for your product is to have, the wife of a contractor talk about why she may ask him to use this. That's on brand if you're about family. Okay?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple different ways in your social media that will be able to impact it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Awesome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Yeah. So for everybody who's listening, go ahead, Kim.
It just shows that we need to connect all the dots in order to make this not only general but very public and very coming from different areas, safety, family, really our main why, why we've created this.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The brand DNA communicates the why of the product, and the look and the feel is impacted by it. Those are all touch points of it. And then when it comes to branding and you are launching the brand out publicly, it's about the consistency of messaging, right? And you can have variations because you actually have a couple markets. So this is important for everybody to understand. The brand communicates to several markets. You have large builders as one potential audience, right? Large builders, contractors, those guys. And then you have retailers like Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, distributors, and then you also have the actual tool manufacturers and the consumers, right? So when you're looking at branding, it needs to tweak a little bit for each of these markets, but still have like that core of truth and consistency in it. So
yeah, and then also to be able to get it into municipalities and the government agency is a whole nother aspect of it, which will be a big piece of it as well.
Yeah, the good news is that municipalities and government are going to be influenced by the same brand factors as a builder, right? So those are kind of closely related, which is really nice because it doesn't give you like a fifth market that you have to really be concerned about. You could kind of group them together. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing up the social media piece, because I think that's something where people get way off on their branding and they're just out there commenting on random stuff instead of being selective and consistent.
Yeah, that's good.
Focus is huge.
Yeah, focus gives speed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Can I mute your line for your privacy? We've got one or two more questions, and then I think we're going to wrap for the day. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. We just adore working with you too. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We love you guys too. You're welcome. Bye.
So everybody, I wanted you to hear that because the perspective about what happens when you're in the middle of a shift in branding and what happens for you energetically. I know that we were talking a little bit about energy. It actually creates more belief for you in your product, and it also gives you a way to communicate more effectively and faster about things. So let's see, I see we've got a question on Facebook Live. We've got a couple actually. So let's see, Maurice. Hi Amy, I showed up a bit late. Louis Vuitton just copied his art handbag idea. Oh, Maurice, that's heartbreaking. They just copied it? Or is it that they started doing art handbags? Those are different issues. If they copied your art on the handbag, then you might have a copyright case and some copyright infringement on the art itself. If it's on the idea of putting artwork on handbags, there's not a whole lot of protection on that, I would imagine. I think that you're going to need to talk to a copyright attorney about that one. Let's see, another question on Facebook Live. Larry Alvarado, what's important to remember when you're trying to rebrand? Wow. Rebranding is a little different because when you're rebranding something, if there's a lot of brand equity and momentum behind the current brand, but you need to just refresh it, then you want to look at doing some subtle tweaks. Or if you're going to do a complete rebrand and the visuals are going to change a lot, you have to actually remember to bring your audience along with you on the journey, okay? It's really, really important because otherwise you could lose all the momentum that happened under the first brand. So an example of bringing your audience along with you would be like the way Starbucks did their rebrands and their logo changes over the years. It went from being the circle with the figurehead in the middle and the text around the outside to they streamlined the centerpiece. And then from there, the next change was they got rid of the outer ring and they put Starbucks below it, right? And then they've trained us to kind of get some distinctions on the brand by the way that they treat the font and the way they do things. They change the colors on certain mugs. And so now that we understand that that badge is Starbucks, we also know that that green is Starbucks, but they don't let us look for it only in green. You know, you'll see it on other things in other colors or in white. So they're stretching our perception of what their logo is, but they always have a core. So when you're rebranding, always remember to bring your people along with you in the process. If you have, like this show, for example, it was originally the Product Power Coaching Calls. And then internally we abbreviated it to PPCC, but that was like just an internal notation. And then I realized that there was a disconnect. A lot of people didn't know what power coaching was. So it's being rebranded to the Product Business Show. And that came about because the additional distribution channels and see the other things that are happening. And what happens is that we have to actually let people know what's going on. Otherwise, all the emails would just be a massive disconnect, right? If you thought you were on the Product Power Coaching call list and all of a sudden you got something from the Product Business Show list, you'd be going like, I didn't sign up for that. But if we tell you ahead of time, hey, you're going to start seeing new logos. Oh, you know what? We're in the process of rebranding this. You're going to see some new naming. You're going to, like that. Then people just kind of go, oh, growth, right? If you bring them along with you, they'll perceive it as growth and evolution. If you leave them out of the loop, they perceive it as just a shift and they don't know that they trust it. So it's really important to bring people along. So number one thing when you're rebranding. And then I see we've got one last question from a phone number ending in 6853. Hi there, I think this is Monica.
Hi, Amy, it is.
Hey there.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. What's your question today?
You know, you guys answered it in your session with Jeff. It was my product would have different bottles and different brands for different beers, and I was just curious if you had some thoughts on how far you can kind of linger from the logo while keeping the core the same. But you really kind of touched on it already. So,
well, there's a
that was my question. But you answered it.
You know what? There's a couple extra things. The Starbucks analogy is really good for you. Where they have slightly modified versions they're using on coffee mugs and slightly different on the gift cards. And even our company logo is a good example for you, because we use the round part of our logo by itself. We have that trademarked. We have it trademarked with the text, and then we have the text alone trademarked. So as far as this trademark strategy, we're covered no matter how we use it. When it comes to a beverage like beer, there's going with a visually consistent feel can be a good way. If you look at even the wine industry, like you should maybe look at Bully Hill Vineyards. They do hand drawn illustrated labels that are really cool, but there's kind of a consistent feel that goes throughout the line, and that sort of lets you know that it's a Bully Hill product. So the visual, like 1 or 2 elements that consistently repeat across the labels, is a good way to go when you have to have variety because of what your product is. Does that help?
Got it. Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome. And that'll let you put the branding effort and money behind the brewery, but still have distinction among the different kinds. And you might consider kind of color coding the labels for the different beers.
Right.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
You're welcome. I'm excited to see you on Friday. We're going to have some fun. It's awesome. So for everybody who's in the LA area, Monica has a brewery out in, I'll let you give the address and things. Where could they find you?
Oh, thank you. It's Chino Valley Brewery. It's in Ontario, California. It's at 1609 South Grove. It's at Grove and Locust, kind of the exit of the 16 freeway in Grove in Ontario.
Got it. And you're only open like Wednesday through Saturday, right?
Exactly. And since you've given me the stage, let's see. Wednesday's free trivia, which is fun. It starts at 7. Saturdays, people bring in their food usually, and it's a good time. And Friday nights are pretty busy with happy hours and stuff like that too after work.
Yeah. So for everybody who's not familiar with this brewery, they actually have a tasting room. And they've got a really popular blonde brew. It's your mango blonde, right? Did I get that right?
Yes, it's the mango blonde. It's also called mountain mango. I guess is that we had to give it a name to enter it into the LA Fair Craft Beer Festival. Mm-hmm. So if you see mountain mango, that's also our mango blonde.
Yeah, but if you want to try that one, I hear via the grapevine that you have to get there like really early in the week. Do not wait till Saturday. So if you're interested in microbrew and craft brew, I strongly encourage you to go check out Monica's tasting room. I'm sure we'll be out there at some point. Jeff's a craft brew guy. So, but anyway, thank you for your question. And as far as your branding goes, that will influence some of these larger opportunities that are coming your way. Okay, so we should definitely look at it on Friday, okay? Cool. Well, I'm going to mute your line for your privacy. And everybody, that's it for today. I think we've got all our Facebook Live questions are answered. And I'm going to go over to our webcast one last time here and just make sure that we took care of everybody there. Perfect. And I think we are done with the phone lines as well. So everyone, branding is really an important effort in your business, and it's usually best done in conversation with somebody else. Even though we do a lot of branding work and a lot of naming of things, when it came to naming my own company, I got in my head and I had to talk it out with a couple friends. And it's really hard to do in a vacuum by yourself because you don't know if your brand is actually communicating what you're intending. So get help when it comes to branding and when it comes to messaging or your package design and the visual look of it. It's too important in your project to kind of, do it marginally, okay? So with that, everybody, have a great rest of your week. I'm so honored that you join us for these. We will have another call in another show in 2 weeks. And I haven't picked the topic yet, so watch your emails and we'll make sure to take care of everybody then. With that, I'm going to open up the phone lines in case anybody wants to say goodbye for the week. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.
You too, Amy. Goodbye.
The conference is now completed. Goodbye.
Okay, so for everybody who's on the Facebook, Anya Linder is here. Nice. Maurice, that's such a shame. That you had that. I'm going to scroll around here, and so if I'm touching the screen, just forgive my hands for a sec. So they started doing art handbags, not as designs. Yeah, that's a great perspective, Maurice. It could be a good thing when Louis Vuitton starts doing it, and there's other lines that do that, and other artists that have kind of paved that way. So it could be good. So let's see, you got to go out to another meeting. So the Louis Vuitton thing being your big break could change the face of the handbag industry, and you were first. Got it. So, that's awesome perspective. And it's really going to be about speed because obviously they have deeper pockets because they're a more established business. So, be very strategic about it. And you can probably also do some custom audience kinds of things on Facebook for some advertising around people who like their bags. You can look at the technology that they're using to build their site, see if there's any changes you want to make to your technology platforms based on that. I'm thinking, how can you leverage the momentum and the exposure of that kind of bag? So that's where I would look. And so great way to reframe it for yourself instead of being freaked out about it. I love that you're being proactive. So I know you've got another meeting. Talk to y'all soon. Bye for now. Oh, you're welcome, Anya. And Gayla, you're welcome too.